I've got some sad news. Jim Jones informed me before worship that we're going to have one less attendee this morning in worship. They got that mouse. They got that mouse that ran right up the center aisle here, do you remember? Literally right up, from what I understand. I didn't see it. But I heard it ran right up the center aisle here after running through the office last Sunday morning. That was last Sunday, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure, yeah. And I do apologize for it. It never really occurred to me that I had my bike here, motorcycle, last Sunday, and people kept asking me, whose bike is that at? Whose bike? I said, it's Joe Ellen's. It's Joe Ellen Bashford's. And a couple people are looking at me like I speak in Greek. And not, I wasn't really overtly trying to lie about it. It's just something a guy says. I figured I figured for sure they'd realize you only ride Harleys, so they know better. Mine's BMW. That's what Fred says anyway. But he only rides Harley. Hogs. Annie gave me a great list I want to share with you real quick. This is great. Before we get into the meat of the scripture here, do you know your hymns? I want to see if you know your hymns. Did you know how personal many of the hymns in our glorious United Methodist hymnal really are? They're very personal according to profession. Do you know what the dentist's hymn is? The dentist, crown him with many crowns. The politician's hymn, standing on the promises. The IRS agent's hymn, I surrender all. The gossip's hymn, pass it on. Yeah. The massage therapist's hymn, he touched me. The realtor's hymn, I've got a mansion just over the hilltop. The shopper's hymn, sweet by and by. And for those who speed on the highway, none of you here do that, right? Those that speed on the highway, a few hymns. If you're going 55 miles per hour, it's God will take care of you. If you jump it to 75 miles an hour, nearer my God to thee. 85, this world is not my home. 95 miles an hour, Lord, I'm coming home. And if you jump to 100, precious memories. Oh, Lord, give me a sense of humor. Give me the grace to see a joke, to get some humor out of life, and pass it on to other folks. May that be your prayer today. Let's bow our heads in prayer, shall we? Lord, we thank you for the gift of your word, and as we continue to think on these things, open our hearts, open our minds to hear you, really hear you. Amen. Well, how many of you rely, and I mean really rely on your car GPS or your phone's GPS and where you need to go? How many really rely on that? I do. I understand that. I know I do. In fact, I usually have Lori enter the addresses because our GPS, frankly, really doesn't seem to like me very much. When we leased our second newer Jeep, they had updated the GPS system, and we struggle. We really do. We struggle with the difference between the two models. But there are issues. There are definitely issues with relying on a GPS. A few years ago, and I'll never forget this, I don't think you will either. A few years ago, a couple, in fact, the youth director, a couple from our previous church, decided they wanted to get married on the beach in South Carolina. And this obviously is a really neat opportunity. I don't always get asked to do weddings on the beach in South Carolina, so I agreed. So the problem was following the GPS's directions to get over to the island. It was actually on a little island off the coast where this beach was located. The GPS kept telling us to turn right, didn't it? Repeatedly, turn right, wouldn't give up on it, turn right, which would have led directly into the Atlantic Ocean. Literally. I mean, as literal as I can be. Apparently, they had built a bridge much farther down the road that the GPS was obviously unaware of. And so thankfully, we did not blindly follow her directions and finally made it to our destination. I also read about an issue that involved a certain phone company. I won't name them because I think that's low class, and a lot of you probably have a phone from this company, but it's named after a fruit. That's all I'll tell you. And their customers who were using a GPS National Park Hiking Trails app on their iPhones were warned about some serious glitches. In several national parks, you see, the identified trailhead, the mileages, and all the directional guides, they're all completely off. And several hikers indeed got seriously lost because they downloaded trail information that was fatally flawed. So those hikers had faith in the electronic guidance their hiking app had given them. But that faith was rewarded with a wandering in the wilderness experience in the literal sense of the word. If truth be told, we don't take much on faith anymore. Or do we? Let's be more precise. We don't take much on faith from human sources. Anything a politician or a government bureaucrat or a corporate CEO or now even an athlete says and swears to is almost immediately suspicious and suspect. Network media, government warnings and recommendations of professionals like doctors, lawyers, financial advisors, tarot card readers. These days, we take them all with a hefty helping of salt or bucketfuls of aspirin. But as the emergency Apple app warning revealed, we do seem to place our faith in our electronics. We have faith. We have more faith in the artificial intelligence than human intelligence. We input all of our most private information, personal, financial, medical, emotional, and we trust that it's safely stored away. We routinely, nearly every day, hit send, secure in our faith that our messages will go swiftly to its appointed destination and nowhere else without interception or invasion. We trust our family trips to a GPS screen and a computer-generated voice that tells us where to go. What would you do today? If your GPS suddenly instructed you to drive your car around the outer belt 7 times, honking your horn all along the way? What would you do? What if your GPS insisted this was the only way to reach your destination? Would you have faith? Would you have faith and follow directions? I doubt it. But in today's epistle text, it's that degree of faith that the author holds up as part of our great cloud of witnesses at Jericho. At Jericho, Joshua got some pretty bizarre sounding instructions directly from God. He and the people were to stomp around. They were to stomp around the city 7 times while blowing horns, and then culminate the march by gathering their voices together in one big shout. This was the divine answer to toppling the walled fortress city of Jericho. Now, Joshua and the Israelites, remember, they had lived a hard scrabble life. 40 years wandering in the wilderness, generations of slavery in Egypt. They knew that it takes a fight to defeat might. Yet they had responded and obeyed those weird instructions out of faith in God, who had delivered them from slavery and promised them a future. Now, often, I hear this often, I used to think it myself, that somehow, and examine yourself to see if this is going on perhaps subconsciously in you, that somehow back in Bible times, if I can use that phrase, it was somehow easier to believe in God, it was easier to have faith. I'm telling you, that's just dead wrong. That's just dead wrong. That's just absolutely not true. I'm not sure where it comes from. Maybe it's because we're reading a lot of stories from that era. The exact opposite was true. In the ancient world, putting your faith in God, it was even a more astonishing idea than it is today. The ancient small g, and when I use the term gods here, it's small g gods were a capricious lot, sometimes finding favor with individual humans, sometimes purposefully setting them up for failure. Albert Einstein famously declared that God, quote unquote, God did not play dice with the universe. But for Zeus and his lot, it was a non-stop Las Vegas on Olympus. They played dice. All the gods did it. They played dice with everybody. Reading an anthology of the antics and actions of the Greco-Roman gods is like reading a bad teenage novel. The gods, just like their human counterparts, they were backbiting, secretly scheming, ultimately betraying, completely untrustworthy, and wholly unfaithful. And to the human population they supposedly governed, it was utter foolishness. It was foolishness indeed to have faith in those gods. It was the very essence of wisdom to fear those gods. Listen, they make great stories, but terrible gods. So the sacred relationship between Yahweh, the creator God, and those who honored God changed that notion of little g gods, plural, forever. The long list of those who chose to have faith in our Father and God's promises and his presence is given in today's epistle text. It's just the smallest slice of a history of real relationships between people of faith and a faithful God. Through the history of Israel, humanity slowly learned that God, our Father, was in fact deserving of our faith. In victory and in defeat, in triumph and through tortures, God's presence never faltered. It never faltered. He never played dice with them, and human faith had an unfailing anchor finally. Living a life by faith opens doors to amazing possibilities, my friends. A by faith life gives you an attitude of yes instead of no. A by faith life opens up one to receptiveness instead of defensiveness. A by faith life addresses challenges and real hardships with the spirit set, not just the mindset of why not. It moves forward instead of constantly bewailing, why me? Why me? Why me? And just utterly collapsing in defeat. Examples of faithfulness. The examples of faithfulness given in today's epistle text, they're all over the map. And those specifically named, and I'm sure you caught the list, it's actually the second week we're doing this, a similar theme. They experienced, those people in the list and way more, experienced true triumphs and affirmations because of their faith. As the author writes, because of their faith and only because of their faith. But they also fell flat with their failures. And we often miss this. We often miss it. I always answer, at least try to, this question direct. I'll hear it's almost routine from people that don't go to church, and I'll hear this. I'll hear something similar. I don't go to church. I'm not going to get involved with those hypocrites. Have you ever heard that? Church is full of hypocrites. I'm not going to go. I want nothing to do with a pack of hypocrites. And I say outright, well, why don't you consider it and come? There's always room for one more. I mean that. I hope you all understand that. We all are. You understand that aspect of the gospel, and we got a whole lot of talking to do. It's a fact. Come on. There's always room for one more. Samson and David both fell flat in the bedroom. Samson and David both fell flat in the bedroom. Gideon and Barak backpedaled before going into battle. Samuel succumbed to political pressures, and Saul paid the ultimate price, Moses a murderer. Now, who's there not to talk about? I'm not getting on these guys. We all do it. Peter making a career out of denying Jesus. Pick somebody. A life of faith is not a perfectly lived life. We say it again. A life of faith is not a perfectly lived life, thank God. But it's a life that knows how to reset itself. Reset itself when things go off track, and they will. Faithfulness is not a state of being, but a state of becoming. It is a process. Faithfulness is an ever ongoing process of reset and reboot. Reset and reboot. Now, doesn't it seem that the world steals Christianity's best lines? I think they do. I think the world often steals our best lines. Could it be that they steal our best lines because we don't know we have them? Could be. We don't know our own stuff. That happened with Do It. That happened with No Fear. And now it's happened again with the cloud. The cloud. Written 2,000 years ago, Hebrews 12:1 describes the real cloud. The real cloud. The author of Hebrews extols the ongoing power and presence of this great cloud of witnesses. Cloud of witnesses who help us define and defend our faithfulness. We don't live in the past. We live out of the past. And the voice and values of the cloud ought to shape and steer us. How many of you here today have entrusted by faith all your most important, sensitive, personal information to the electronic cloud? For school, the doctorate program, they called it the canvas. Ugh! The canvas. Everything was the canvas. Did you submit your papers on the canvas? Constantly. I don't have to remind you, it was awful. Well, they'd say they didn't get it. I knew they got it. Oh, we didn't get it. Send it again. You dare never erase anything. Always keep it on about 16 different backups. The canvas. That's the way what school is today. How many of you regularly back up all your electronic files, all your financial information, all your doodled thoughts, all your dreams and schemes to the cloud every day? Every day. I bet it's not many. But I'm here to tell you that the electronic cloud that saves all that digital life is nothing compared to the spiritual cloud that gives us a firm foundation for our faithfulness. The digital cloud of storage will fail you. The divine cloud of the centuries will never, ever fail you. Now, I'm reminded of Charles Wesley. Charles Wesley reminds us in the hymn, "Come, let us join our friends above." I think it's number 709 in your hymnals. Here are the lyrics. "Even now by faith we join our hands with those that went before, and greet the blood-sprinkled bands on the eternal shore." First-time flyer. A first-time flyer was asked for a report after landing. He said, "Well, it was all right, but I never really trusted the thing. I never really let my weight down." And having soloed, I can say that's kind of like, you don't want to let your weight down. We sing "Trust and Obey." We sing "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus." But how many of us actually let our weight down? Let our weight down. How many sing and mean, "Take my life and let it be"? Or how many sing and really mean, "Take my life and let me be"? Theologian Reuben Alves put the difference between faith and hope like this: hope is hearing the melody of the future. Faith is dancing to that melody here and now. Now. Will you dance? Will you dance to the future this morning? Will you let your weight down? Will you live by faith, not by sight? Will you trust God with all you are? Will you lean on the everlasting arms? Will you let your weight down on the cloud? And all God's people said, Amen. Amen.